And now, let's take a look at the mimicking Hurritan in the wild and find out how one can destroy a regiment of Junkers 87s without alarming one's shrink. Okay, that was a bit too much. When the Nazis first met the British Hurricanes with red stars in the skies of the USSR, they dropped a mocking letter on one of the Soviet airfields saying, "Please stop ruining the paint on our planes." Truth be told, they were right. 8 medium machine guns by Browning could only make the German pilots laugh those days. But they wouldn't be the last to laugh in this situation. A long time ago, we've told you what had happened to the Hurricanes that were shipped to the USSR by the British government. In short, their armament drastically changed from 8 Browning machine guns to 2 20mm Shivak cannons and 2 heavy-caliber Berezin UB machine guns. You can imagine the shock of the Luftwaffe pilots when a good old and harmless Hurricane suddenly started tearing their planes apart like they were made of paper. Nobody would laugh at the Hurricane anymore. This indistinguishable from the regular Hurricane, so the Germans now had to fear not only the Soviet Hurricanes, but also the British ones, just in case those crazy Russians shipped the cannons to Britain as well. But the funniest part of the joke revealed itself one day in autumn 1942, when the Soviet pilots had to stop a whole regiment of the Junkers 87s from bombing a village called Kolpino near the sieged Leningrad. That day, Major Nikolai Nikitin led a group of 6 Hurricans on a routine patrol. The planes were old and not very fast, so they clearly couldn't compete with the newest Gustavs. But then came an order to intercept a whole army of Stukas covered by the Messerschmitts and prevent them from bombing Kolpino. Major Nikitin knew the Hurricans were screwed. 6 old and slow planes against all that power? No way the German fighters would let them do anything to those bombers. So he decided to outsmart them all. He lost some altitude so that the first attack would be from an upward flight. 2 Stukas in the back of the formation went down. But what was the point? There were like 50 of those still in the sky. Their leaders weren't dead, and the German radio was already screaming for backup. And it was coming. The brand new Gustavs with black crosses and green hearts on the fuselages. Little did they know how that would end for them. Suddenly, Major Nikitin ordered his men to extend their landing gears and reform by 3s. The Soviet pilots were shocked, because, we're already quite slow. Those landing gears will only slow us more. What's the point? Well, Nikitin wasn't aiming for speed. The thing was that the Hurricane's shape was almost the same as the Stukas. The only difference was that the Junkers 87 had a non-retractable landing gear. He also knew that they were flying in groups of 3. Extending the landing gear and changing formations, he literally made his group invisible for the coming Messerschmitts. Of course, it wouldn't work in broad daylight and at short distance. But the sun was almost down, and the German fighter pilots were coming from above, desperately trying to see anything between themselves and the Earth. The radio went live again. "Where are the Hurricanes?" "What do you mean, where are the Hurricanes? They're right here. 6 of them. They've extended their landing gear." "6? There are like dozens of them here." And one of the Gustavs opened fire to the nearest seemed-to-be Hurricane. He received a good load of screams of horror and hatred in return, as another Junkers went down in flames. The amazing speed of the Gustavs let them down. Trying to distinguish the enemy from their own, they'd rushed by the bombers in milliseconds and had to go a long way sideways, losing time for a group turnaround. That was exactly what Major Nikitin was waiting for. He wished his men bon appétit and shot point blank 2 enemy bombers in 1 second. The other 5 Hurritons weren't wasting time either. The German pilots panicked. Dropping bombs without aiming, they ruined the formations and flew back in complete chaos. And the aces from the Green Heart Squadron finally turned around to see the sky crowded with the Hurricanes. The Hurritons were long on the ground, and the radio was still transmitting terrifying screams of the German pilots. At times, some Stuka's crew would suddenly see a Hurricane in another Ally bomber, or realize that there's a Gustav on their 6 ready to open fire. Air gunners had to constantly fire in the sky to prove the fighter pilots that they were flying a 2-seater bomber. Needless to say, they were shouting all sorts of foul words at those idiots in the Jagdgeschwader 54 that had to cover them. As for the Soviet pilots, they laughed a lot. And after that, they made some good and promising conclusions. Yes, the Hurricane isn't good at speed or climbing or maneuvers. All that is true, but it's quite robust and can carry heavy cannon weapons and even rockets and bombs. So why don't we turn it into a 2-seater strike aircraft, giving a second seat to an air gunner? What do we lose, huh? But that's a story for another time.